Hello, it's John Heaton, and I wasn't going to do this album because it's never been a favourite of mine, but I was listening to it in the car. I thought I'd dig it out and give it a listen. From 1986, I was actually in the States when this came out. I remember I was on my year off, and I remember picking it up and being quite happy with it when it first came out. The first thing to be said is the dreadful cover. It really does smack of 80s poor taste. I remember Doctor Who was dressed up in similar colours, Colin Baker, at the time. I think the reviews were fairly harsh, and not just on the cover, but on the content. Charlie apparently at the time was addicted to heroin and alcohol, I think. So that was one of the reasons that Jagger gave for not touring. But maybe a more important reason is that Mick and Keith were not seeing eye to eye at all at this stage. Mick had just launched a solo career with She's the Boss, which severely pissed off Keith, who didn't think that any of them should branch outside of the group, which is a little farcical considering they'd been together for 20 years at that time. They did come together for this album, recorded in 85 for the most part, released in the spring of 86, but it's evident from the videos you can watch, One Hit to the Body in particular. Mick and Keith are jarring at each other, almost getting into a fight in the video. Pretty unpleasant to watch, and of course they did implode or explode soon after this album came out. And Mick went on to do a second solo album, Primitive Cool, and Keith came out with Talk Is Cheap, which was a very brave debut solo album. And a lot more, if we're honest, a lot more to commend that album, Talk Is Cheap, than there is to commend this album. It's one of their less distinguished works, although it has its moments like any Stones album. This is the back cover. We've got the lyrics included here for the first time. This is the first record with the new CBS contract. Apparently CBS insisted on the words being included. There's a cartoon which is very difficult to read and not particularly amusing or interesting. And then the label is quite interesting because it's got an alternative of the front cover with the group in different positions, so that's quite interesting. It says Rolling Stones Records, but apparently it was distributed by CBS. I'm not sure if it says. When I was just reading, yeah, CBS. So it did okay. I think it was number 4 in the US, number 4 in the UK. But, you know, if ever there was a remark to sum up a Stones album unfavourably, it would be that the Keith tracks are easily the highlight. And Keith sings twice on this album. The last song on side 1, Too Rude, and the last song on side 2, Sleep Tonight. And to me, they're two of the best tracks on the album. In fact, Too Rude is a cover song, and that's probably my favourite track on the album. So that's a bit of a sad reflection of the rest of the material, perhaps. I mean, it's not a disaster. Jimmy Page is on this album guesting, I read. I didn't know that. He's on One Hit to the Body, which starts off pretty promisingly with this great riff, and then the drums come in and the bass, and it's pretty good. But it turns out to be just a formulaic number with not much meat behind it. I just want to mention the previous album, Undercover, which I have reviewed on my channel, and I was very pleased at the time because I was at Compass Point Studios where the album was recorded, so I thought I'd definitely do a video here. But I didn't have a microphone and I was in the teeth of the wind, so that video was a bit of a disaster, but I might have to do it again. But I would say Undercover, despite the dreadful cover art again on that album, is a more enjoyable record than this one, because at least there were moments of Jagger Richards' magic in the songwriting department with Too Much Blood in particular. And The Pain of Love on side 1, I thought, and Undercover, the title track, was a brave foray into it lyrically, and, you know, okay, it's a disco song, but it was quite, and it had a good video. So I think Undercover is braver, more innovative. This one is just smacks of tiredness, to be honest. The group could still play. The drums are too loud, for example, though. It's very predictable in a bad way, I'm afraid. Sometimes you put on a Stones record knowing exactly what you're going to get, and you don't mind that it's sounds like the Stones, you know, like all of those albums from the 70s, when they're pretty similar to each other, but they've got a far higher standard of musicianship and songwriting, and they had more energy to them. This one just... And another thing to sum up where the Stones were at the time is the Live Aid concert, where they didn't perform as a group. Jagger performed solo with David Bowie, Dancing in the Street, and then Keith and Ronnie appeared with Dylan on acoustic guitar in Philadelphia. And it's worth checking out. It's interesting because they don't really know what song or what key Bob is playing in, and they're trying to follow. So that's an interesting historical footnote if you want to check out Live Aid. I'm not sure if it's on YouTube or not, but it's... So as I said, the Stones arguing a lot during this time. They would come together in '89 for Steel Wheels and tour, and then of course they've been together ever since. So historically the 80s were really the only time when they had a real bust up and you know, left each other for a good few years. And I think it was a good thing, because Steel Wheels came out and it was a lot better. It was an improvement on this, and it was an improvement on Undercover. It was a return to form to an extent anyway. So going through the tracks on here, One Hit to the Body, as I said, it's a by numbers Stones song and nothing special. Fight has got, it's not a bad rocker, but it's got really annoying lyrics about there's a space where your face used to be and I'll slash your face with a razor blade, and just completely annoying lyrics. I'm not sure who wrote them, but you know, you're living up to this hard bad boy image, totally unnecessary. Harlem Shuffle, quite a successful cover, quite well played, but one tires of it after a couple of minutes, goes on too long. It was a single, quite a successful single. And then Hold You Back is a kind of monotonous rocker, nothing special. Too Rude, as I say, is a damn good reggae cover. I'm not sure who wrote it. Who wrote Too Rude? Roberts. And the rest, by the way, Ronnie Wood co-writes 4 of the tracks out of the 8, so that's interesting. Harlem Shuffle, written by Ralph and Nelson. Not sure if I know who did the original. I did know it, but I've forgotten. So side 1 opens with Too Rude, then side 2 opens with Winning Ugly, which is another, pun not intended, ugly lyric. I presume Mick wrote it. It's all about, I used to cheat when the referee wasn't looking, and I'm just like the politicians. I know how to fool people, and I'm winning ugly, and the opposition is crying because I'm... Basically, the message of the lyric is I'll do anything to win, even if it means stabbing someone in the back or cheating. And it's just a thoroughly disagreeable lyric, and I hate it. Musically, it's okay. Back to Zero is kind of built on a riff, kind of nice guitar riff, nothing special. As a song, it absolutely does nothing. But Mick sings it okay, and it sounds... aesthetically it sounds okay, I suppose. Title track Dirty Work is about the strongest number on the album, probably, of the self-written ones anyway, with some really nice guitar work from Keith and Ronnie and a nice guitar break in the middle. And one wishes that they'd put more energy into the rest of the album, because this title track works pretty well. Again, the lyrics are questionable and not very interesting. And then what else have we got? A couple more songs. Had It With You. Remember, this track was available on the jukebox of a bar I was in Florida for several nights running in the spring of '86. I think it must have been the B-side of Harlem Shuffle or one of the singles, because it was definitely available on the jukebox, and we played it. And it's not a bad track. It's a kind of angry track. Maybe it was Mick or singing to Keith or vice versa. I've had it with you. Wasn't a single, but could have been, I suppose. Not a bad track. And then the album finishes with Sleep Tonight, with Keith singing quite effectively, with these sleepy backing vocals. It goes on too long for sure. So I listened to it in the car today. It wasn't a disaster. I think the title track is decent. I think Harlem Shuffle's okay, and I think Keith's 2 contributions, particularly Too Rude, that works pretty well. But the rest of it is... subpar stones, I'm afraid. So thank you for watching. See you next time.